The reasoning was similar to yours. It's stretching yourself too thin, likely not saying no enough, not setting the right boundaries.
Yeah, especially if you're new to something, you feel like you underperform, so you try to kind of, compensate for that a little bit.
Yeah, you compensate. And you might also not ask the right questions. You might also not ask for help because you think it's going to reflect back on you. It's only in recent years that I started really diving into mental health and actually into the mental health of our industry and what we can do to make it better. So next to my day job, I'm also co-chair of the Health and Wellbeing Committee at the Visual Effects Society. And we're focusing on what can we give as resources to our industry. What can we give to help our industry, to give pointers. So the Visual Effects Society, for example, if you're a member, you have access to a member assistance program, which is a phone number, which is on the website in the membership section. For your part of the world, in your language of the world, in whatever, you can call for free and get counseling. You get help. Not only mental health help, but also legal help and other stuff. But it was put in place to give people the opportunity to have somewhere to call, someone to talk to. What we've also done was last year to produce a webinar series around mental health. So we had 2 psychiatrists and a clinical psychologist talk with people like John Dykstra, talk with people like an animation director and a producer, a visual effects supervisor, and just talk about topics like, okay, how do I have a work-life balance? So John Dykstra, for example, talks about work-life balance with 2 psychiatrists and a clinical psychologist. Very, very interesting. Our animation director, Mark, talks with the same group of people about imposter syndrome as a director of Kung Fu Panda. I think the first step is always the acknowledgement of there's something. I need to invest into something. I need to investigate a little bit further. I need to acknowledge something is not going right. I feel tired. I feel like I don't care about things I used to care. A lot of telltale signs for burnout. And it's okay. That's the thing. It's really okay. And the beautiful thing is, in the last couple of years, I've started to see people wake up to it and start to openly talk about it. I can very proudly say I have a therapist. I'm seeing my therapist on a weekly basis, and it's an utterly amazing experience. Because a therapist is not there to solve your problems. A therapist is there to help you understand yourself. So sometimes my therapist is asking a question, I'm like, yeah, no, I've never thought about it this way, but thank you. Now it's very, very conscious. And yep, okay, cool. Yep, okay, now I know why I'm doing something like this. So it's really, really refreshing to work with therapists, to talk with friends openly about your mental health. If it's like, okay, I'm feeling burned out. Why are you feeling burned out? Are you feeling burned out because it's too much overtime? Are you feeling burned out because something in your private life is going wrong? Are you feeling burned out because your supervisor is not nice? And I mean not nice in a nice way of saying it. Are you feeling burned out because production sets unrealistic targets? It's all about communication. We need to talk to each other. We need to help each other. We need to acknowledge each other. And sometimes we need to admit, okay, it might actually be really good to talk to someone professional. And the first step is always go to your general physician, say, this is how I'm feeling. Can I get a I don't know what the English word is, a referral to a psychologist, and talk to a psychologist about it. And suddenly you see there's a complete new world. There's a world you haven't looked at about yourself. It's really amazing.
The bad thing about burnout as a kind of a sickness is basically you don't notice it yourself most of the time, and it's like until you burn out, basically, while other people mostly notice or have like the capacity to notice it. I remember like I had a supervisor, and he was a dick, like literally. But he was like on the edge of burnout. It was obvious. It was like combined with both. He was burning himself up and created this environment of being much more kind of like aggressive and challenging other people, like, very unpleasantly, kind of like, you can see that. But he basically pushed everyone away at the same time. So it was kind of like, even if you try to, help this person and you kind of notice that he has problems and that kind of reflects back to other people, there's just like, he just continued pushing, and it was like nothing to do there to help them. I think that is one of the biggest problem in burnout, is to recognize it, even, to recognize that you are working, because that's the thing, you're so scheduled, basically you don't have time to think. You constantly, I know a lot of people, their schedule is full all day. If they don't work, they basically are in the gym, or if they're in the gym, they're meeting friends, or if they're meeting friends, they're working, or like basically always constantly jumping from one situation to another.
You're absolutely right. It's and this is it's actually the craziest bit. It's when you talk with people about it, of looking for help, right? Looking for help. It's the first step. Look for help. Usually what you get is, I don't have time for that. I don't have the energy for that. We as humans tend to find excuses for everything.
Sure.
And there's a concept. Everyone who has flown on a plane has heard the speech of, put the oxygen mask on first and then help the child next to you. Because if you can't breathe, you can't help the child. So it's really, really important to understand the telltale signs. And really, Google it. Burnout symptoms. Get those signs in your head.
They just added a new thing to that one. Please remove your mask before applying that. It's literally like, you cannot put your hamster into the microwave, dangerous. It will not dry it only, so there's an element of stupidity now in there. But I totally agree. And I think that is also a big problem sometimes, healthcare people are actually predestined to be burnout. Because like people who help other people generally are because they're kind of like ignore themselves much more, and then they end up working for other people, like basically, or people in management or something like that. They're just so focused on other people's problems less than themselves. And I think that is probably kind of a telltale sign. If you are working in a management healthcare industry, you definitely should have a look first, is like, am I going in the burnout, and am I have time for myself, basically? One of the things that I implemented for myself is I always like to have a long morning. It's just a thing for me, where I'm like, have an hour in the morning where I just, wake up slowly, sit at a coffee table, drink my coffee, listen to music, read something, nothing fancy, just sometimes just sit there and look out and stuff like that. For me, not having a stressful morning where I rush things, breakfast or drinking or coffee or whatever, clothing and then going outside or something like that, or in modern case is just like putting something on, opening the laptop and in the meeting. I think that is an important thing. It's just having time to, start the motor in the morning, having time to maybe reflect even, like you can think about what you will do today or what happened yesterday, or just not think at all, like just kind of like waking up is so important compared to, I can just wake up 5 minutes before the meeting, or I can just rush out, take my coffee and, on the way I go to Starbucks or whatever, So I think that for me is actually one of the things, like starting your day well is definitely something where I can just recommend. If you don't have time for that, personally, I think there's a problem, because for me personally, I feel like starting a day slowly kind of opens the day basically for the rest, less stressful, you're less likely to be stressed by things because you kind of like already started, because that's the thing. If you start a day stressful, everything kind of starts to bug you even more, I feel like.
Agreed. Very much agreed. And this is something we've been discussing with the specialist on the webinar series called Reignite Yourself. It's on YouTube. podcasting platforms, you know them better than I, free for your disposal to listen or watch. And it's really having a morning routine. Having routines in general help. There's so much, and the specialists in there talk about tools you can do, like journaling, meditation, yoga, just exercises to center yourself, exercises to reflect yourself. Because at the end, we need to reflect ourselves more. We need to understand ourselves better, and then we can move forward. And something I tend to do, people tend to do, is using the person I'm talking to as a mirror, right? It's like, oh yeah, you're unreasonable. Yeah, likely I'm unreasonable.
That is actually the big thing at the end of the day. Like the morning routine or morning quietness is actually basically the end result is having time for silence and or reflection, something in that, depending what you need at this moment. So if you don't, and it can be at the gym, if you have the mentality for that, you know, if it's not just like I'm doing my routine and that's it. If that's part, for me, it's, for example, cooking and eating. I love that. This is something where I rewind a little bit, you know, cooking dinner and then eating. It's basically something like just the cooking is for me very relaxing, and I kind of enjoy that. I feel like creative also at the same time, and listening to music at the same time. So this is something where I definitely know it kind of puts the stress away. But combine that with the morning routine where I feel like I'm starting into the day. I kind of have this elements, not every day, but I try to make it as often as possible. Generally every day I try to do one of these two things. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest strategies you should have, is like having at least once a day something where it regenerates you or quiets you or something like that, and you're not just like a slave of your calendar, basically. Because that is something that I feel like a lot of people end up like, the busier you are, the more you feel valuable, you know, the more you feel kind of strong, because you feel like, you know, you're contemplating, you're doing something all the time, while at the moment you're not doing something, you end up like this, you know, like. That's also a thing, you know, like being in a train or something, a lot of people are in buses, they're basically always on their phones. And I feel that's exactly the moment where you can have a quiet time, realize what's going on around you, maybe listen to an audiobook, but actively, not just to kind of like speed up time, you know. It's basically like, you know, the power of now. Like, let's bring all this thing back together. It's a little bit, you know, being aware of things. It doesn't matter what you do, but just being aware and not just using the loading screens basically in between as something you need to fill out with bullshit, basically. I think that if you do that, I think that is already a great way to like get away from the clutches of burnout, for example.
You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show.